The North American economy in the 20th century. Economy describes the wealth of a country. This idea takes into account the production and consumption of goods as well as the international importations and exportations with other countries. After the Second World War, the North American economy experienced a difficult course. USA and Canada's economic status fluctuated from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. From the years 1919 to 1939, there was a recession, a recovery, and the Great Depression. What do these terms mean? We'll cover that later. During this webinar, I'll cover a variety of subjects, such as the economical history during the 20th century, the Roaring Twenties and the stock market crash, and lastly, how these ideas are all related to the Great Gatsby. After the war that would end all wars, countries had already sent most of their supplies to Europe. This left governments and citizens underfunded and undersupplied. From 1919 to 1924, USA and Canada encountered a recession, a period in time of which the economy was low and countries were in enormous debts. The recession was influenced by the impact of the Great War. Europe could not afford to import North American products, and the US implemented high tariffs on Canadian products, making Canada lose their status in foreign exchange. In consequence, the rate of unemployment was high, causing a number of Canadians to emigrate towards a southern neighbor. In addition, an astonishing percentage of companies declared bankruptcy. However, the recession slowly came to an end. European countries started borrowing money from the USA to buy Canadian products, the value of wheat skyrocketed, and immigration increased substantially. Most importantly, the expansion of industries caused the recovery to take place. The growth of the automobile, paper, mining, and electric industries guided the economic success. Also, the assembly line was invented to produce product in mass. This economic recovery lowered the unemployment rate, allowed technology to develop, and ultimately allowed the general public to have time for leisure activities. Like all good things do, the economic growth came to an end. Another period of economic distress was forced upon Canadians and Americans. The Great Depression lasted from 1929 to 1939 and impoverished both nations. Primarily caused by the stock market crash, which will be discussed in the next section, this period is known as the most grave crisis in economic history. The economic recovery from the years 1924 to 1929 had a great effect on lifestyle. It was less stressful. The average income for an American raised a few $1,000s. There was more financial stability, and people ended up with more purchasing power and therefore spent extravagantly. In 1922, the top 1% of the population received 13.4% of total income and led wonderful lifestyles, partying and such. Women had the ability to do and wear what they wanted, rebelling against their parents. The Roaring Twenties are known for the lack of financial difficulties in which promoted overall happiness. In the 20s, the American and Canadian economy was so strong, almost too strong. Businesses were rich and everyone was stable. However, the stocks were overvalued. People borrowed money from banks to invest and get their share. Even the banks were using people's money to invest. On October 24, 1929, companies with investments published their financial statements. Bankruptcies were inevitable. Frantically, investors began to sell their stocks. The smart investors were out early. On October 29, 1929, there was the biggest wave of sales of stocks. About 16 million stocks were sold on Wall Street that day. There was no money to flow and the banks were closing. Millions of dollars were lost and the Great Depression followed. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald sets in industrialized American society in 1922. The novel takes place during the transition from the recession to the recovery into the Roaring Twenties. Between 1922 and 1929, the values of stocks increased, company profits increased, and wages increased. Nick Carraway, a bondman, moved to New York City in efforts to capitalize on the success. So I decided to go east and learn the bond business. Everybody I knew was in the bond business, so I supposed it could support one more single man. Fitzgerald, Chapter 1. The Great Gatsby also deals with the economy because people had lots of money to spend leisurely. New Yorkers spent excessively without doubts about future issues. Materialism had influence on the wealthy. For example, Jay Gatsby hosted luxurious parties quite often and bought expensive cars. Little did they know that the Great Depression would ensue caused by their foolish behavior. Lastly, there was a lot of dirty money being circulated in this time. The Prohibition period created organized crime and bootlegging as a means of getting rich. Suspicious individuals made their money off of manufacturing and distributing alcohol, not to mention the use of legitimate businesses like laundromats in efforts to launder money. This technique originated from Al Capone. Many people were under the impression that Meyer Wolfsheim and Gatsby were involved in this activity. "He's a bootlegger," said the young ladies. Fitzgerald, Chapter 4. Global economy heavily influences the lives of citizens in the USA and Canada. The recession, the recovery, and the Great Depression exemplifies why economy, a man-made system, is so important to the success or failure of civilization. The highs and lows during 1919 to 1939 impacted reality as well as literature. The Great Gatsby is a classic work that revolves around social classes in regards to monetary status. There is evidence of Fitzgerald's incorporation regarding the idea of economy by establishing characters and developing setting. Thank you.